Hello, Bruce. I wanted to show you the book. This is the edition of the Marvel Universe. The cover is incredible, very
It's
rare, with a lot of
beautiful.
colors.
It's
Yes,
just beautiful.
it's very creepy and it rocks. Bruce, I wanted to talk about the book. My first question is, time has passed and the book started with an incident that is this censorship that you had with the other publisher. And I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts now about that censorship and that time has passed about those years?
Well, the all cultures go through periods of censorship and darkness, and we are, at least so they say, moving away from that dark period, which I think was a horror for writers. And yet many writers, I feel, were on the wrong side. Writers didn't protest. Writers found ways to justify the censorship of their fellows. My publisher published a first novel recently by a poet named Emily Russo. And Emily Russo was a rather well-known poet, a brilliant poet, who was canceled for simply talking to the wrong person, a canceled person on a podcast. And what they were talking about had nothing to do with politics or anything, but merely because that person she was speaking to had been tainted by cancel culture. She had a contract with a small press in New York called Hiding Press. And they not only canceled the contract, but they excoriated her in public. They named her and essentially called her fascist adjacent. And this happened, this was writ large to many, many writers. So my book, The Marvel Universe, was, I made a contract with a small but also well-known press, and it was a West Coast house. And I thought that was lovely for me because I began my publishing career by a desktop edition of my very first book, but it wasn't yet a novel. It was a series of short stories called Force Majeure.
Yes.
And we sold that out of a bookstore in West Hollywood, 1,000 copies, sold them all. And then I got a contract with Random House in New York. And my new book is out in September, Amputation. And Amputation and all of my books were published in New York. But before I got to my current publisher, which is Arcade Press,
Okay. Yes.
my contract had run out with an East Coast publisher. So I thought it was lovely to return to Los Angeles, where my career began. And he was a longtime fan of mine. I had a lunch with him, and he was very complimentary. He said he'd been following my career for 30 years. And when I turned the book in, there was dead silence. I didn't hear a thing from him. And later I realized he was embarrassed to speak with me. And when I did speak with him, it became clear, though he didn't say it literally, it became clear to me that he had what they call sensitivity readers go through the book. These were so-called experts in gender, in race, and in body positivity. So I failed on all those accounts, And I said to him, what were you thinking when you asked me to write this book? You know my work. My work is transgressive. It's also spiritual, but it's transgressive. And he was very sheepish to the point where he didn't say, we will not publish this book. He didn't have the courage to say that. What he did say was, we could only publish about 40 pages of the book. The book is over 400 pages, you know. So from then, I thought maybe I'll publish this book myself. But when you get into the numbers of that and the difficulty of it, it's just not something that is feasible for a writer to do unless it's a complete, almost objet d'art. You know, it's a piece of art. And then I was told by friends, you know, you've got to find a small publishing house to do this, which I could have done, but it would have taken me a year, you know, a year and a half before the book was published. So I decided to release it into the public domain. And it was a kind of fuck you to everyone, you know, because I didn't want to sell the book for $1.99, you know. And I would say 2 weeks after I released it into the public domain, the book was immediately available on Amazon from a company based in Las Vegas that publishes works in the public domain.
I
There you
have the
go.
book. I bought it and I talked with Ariel and I told you, you don't want you I don't know what happened to Bruce, but I started telling you the story of this. I don't know why the publisher canceled the book. It's very rare. There wasn't too much interviews and info at that time, and it was for me it was very surprising. And I wanted to tell you that it was a shock for South American readers to know, hey, what is this? Why this edition? What is happening?
Well, there's a wonderful writer here in Los Angeles named Sam Wasson. And Sam Wasson is kind of the go-to historian of movies and artists in the industry. He's just finished a new book by Frank Capra. He recently did a book about Francis Ford Coppola and an American zoetrope. And he's quite remarkable. And I know him. And he decided that he would start a publishing house called Felix Farmer. So he does 400 to 500 copies of books and sells them at Book Soup, where Force Majeure was originally sold. So as his very first book, he said he wanted to do the Marvel Universe.
Right.
And he wanted to give me part of the money for it. And I said, no, that's not the idea. It's in the public domain. There's also been there's like on Amazon, at least there used to be, I don't know if it's still there, for $2,000, you could get a coffee table size book of the Marvel Universe, right? So I was very, very heartened that Ariel, that the book was published in South America. I feel I have a deep connection with South America.
Oh,
So
we have a very good connection because your most popular work here is the
yeah,
comic book of Wild Palms. It is
yeah.
our first connection with you beyond movies and Map to the Stars and a lot of incredible stuff. Our first connection is with that comic book that is, who's this guy? What is this? What is this incredible comic of the 90s? And a lot of people, friends here, know you because of this, but you have like a secret career in literature that I love. But a lot of people that don't read in
Yeah.
English, you don't know that. You know, it's very
Well,
unfair.
it's wonderful. So you know, I'm going to try to make my books further available to you, and that's something I think that we can do. So with the Marvel Universe, I'm lucky because I have already a career, but I'm sure that many writers were terribly damaged by this this era, this dark era in American publishing history, and not as fortunate as I was. They didn't have other opportunities. I know many writers then faced with these censorship judgments, these pseudo morality, these judgments of pseudo morality, then altered their own work because
Oh,
they needed the money. They were many, I'm sure, have families and can't find work like other writers do at universities, which are also among the worst offenders and have been among the worst offenders when it comes to the freedom of writers. Appalling, appalling. So after that, I had an idea for another book, which was going to be a fake oral history of a
mhm.
towering figure in American art and literature. And I encountered the same problem with that when there was interest expressed from an East Coast publisher. And one of the vice presidents of that company really understood what I was doing. But when he told the people he worked for about it, who also were familiar with their work, they said, there's no way we can publish that. The reason being that the protagonist of my oral history, who's an imaginary person, becomes goes through transgender surgery late in life, right?
Okay.
And he's also he's half white and half black.
Okay.
And so the idea that I'm writing about someone who is half white and half black and then has transgender surgery in his late 60s was impossible when it came to a white writer
Mm.
feeling that he had the authority or the capability. I wouldn't even say the capability, just the authority to write about that. At that point, my agent, Andrew Wiley, introduced me to Tony Lyons, who owns a publishing house called Skyhorse. And Skyhorse, one of the imprints of Skyhorse is Arcade.
Okay.
Arcade.
Yes.
So Arcade is really an extraordinary press that Tony acquired from Richard Seaver and his wife. Richard Seaver is dead because they had fallen into bankruptcy. And
Okay.
Richard Seaver was the man who discovered
Group.
Sam Beckett.
Group. Yes.
Yeah,
Group Press. Group Press. Yes, I know him. Yes, there is a
he
book
went
very
to
cool.
work. He based on his hiring. I mean, his discovering Beckett. He went to work at Grove and brought Beckett to Grove. So we've revivified Arcade. So Arcade, we're about to publish the first novel by David Mamet. Next year, we're publishing a
William Goldman.
3,000 page opus by William Vollmann in 4
Yes.
hardbacks. So we are a throwback to Grove.
Yes.
And so what we're doing is rather unique at this time. So Andrew Wiley introduced me to Tony, and Tony immediately agreed to publish this book, Roar, which is a fake oral history. And then I've continued to write for them. And the book after Roar was 2 novellas, The Met Gala and Tales of Saints and Seekers, and now Amputation. So things worked out well for me, but I think not very well for many others whose names we will never know.
Great. Well, very sad, but it is how the industry is moving. The process of writing in this book, I think it is very incredible that the book achieved some kind of cool status, like hitting the correct zeitgeist, talking about things like social network, how to write in social network, what is happening with Hollywood in social network, all the Me Too movement. When you started writing this book, uh, how were you aware of social network? How was your process of writing and liberating so natural all these characters?
You know, it's mysterious to me, my how I work. It's mysterious to me. Um, I work very intuitively. I don't have any social media myself. I think my publisher has a little something for me on Instagram, but I never visit it. I never had Facebook. I'm not on X. I'm not on Substack. Um, I have enough distractions in my life, you know.
Okay.
And in terms of how I work, you know, I really feel like a schizophrenic person, you know. On the one hand, my daily life, I feel stupid, you know, and primitive and basic. And the part of me that is the aesthetic life as is a kind of mystical entity, an intuitive and mystical entity that I don't have any strong waking connection to, you know. It's like it has a scent and I can smell that entity, but
Okay.
I don't inhabit it really. It inhabits me. So many of the books that I've written are premonitory. They're almost predictive of trends, and in that way, I think some of it, the most pragmatic part of my work is that I'm able to. It's a catharsis for me. I'm able to exorcise cultural demons or personal demons. In that way, it is some kind of transfusion of blood for me, you know. But I would say that the, you know, maybe it's because I'm in Aries, you know, it's the schizophrenic aspect is there is the mystical, selfless part of me, or what I aspire toward, which is that entity, the scent of that entity. And then there is the part of me that is enraged and petty and vicious, you know. But you can't have one without the other. You can, and people do, writers do. Certain writers are known simply because they scorch the earth, you know. But when there's the sky above, it's pointless for me to focus on the earth. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
yeah, yes.
I do because I walk here, I breathe here, I shit here, I do everything here, and yet I am going somewhere else, as are we all. So my work is hopefully a kind of a mixture, a kind of rageful cosmic stew, you know, of
Okay.
of both those polar opposites.
Okay. Well, for me, it makes a lot of sense because every time I read a Bruce Wagner book or well, I revisit the Wild Palms or Map to the Stars, I see some kind of themes that always are repeating, but something that I think it is in your heart. It is human misery and human ecstasy or human joy. Or like always, these themes are always in every character, in every place, in every sentence. But I wanted to know if in the censorship that you suffered, if they thought that they would, what kind of book they were thinking, you know, of what kind of change you have to do in the prose, in your stuff, because if they knew, why would they reject the book? You know, I understand all the things you told me, but it is something very surprise.
Well, it wasn't surprising to me here. I don't know what your situation is where you are, but for example, one of my characters, uh, Fat Joan, right?
Yes, yes.
She's a very young heiress. Her parents are murdered, and they were billionaires, and she is now the richest adolescent or teenager in the world. And she's very funny. And when her parents died, she began to gain weight. And when you meet her, she's 500 or 600 pounds in this book. And her goal
Yes.
is to become 1,000 pounds. There was a social media figure called the Fat Jewish, and she
Mhm.
liked him a lot. So she called herself the Fat Joan in a kind of homage to that. And she um, is beloved. She has, I don't know, millions of followers on her IG account. What the publisher said to me, quite literally, was not even a fictional character can call herself fat.
Why?
So if you start with that, which is madness,
Yes.
it's a violently oppressive and psychotic thing to say. You can extrapolate from that what their other problems were, because
I
you know, so you're dealing with lunacy, right? And their objections, I could tell that he was withholding so many of them, but the ones that came to mind that he expressed
yes.
left would left me speechless, which is what they wanted to do, was leave me
Yes.
speechless, literally without speech. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes, very, very crazy for these times, but yes, this is very clear the answer. And related to this, something that is very interesting for the book is that I try to find in another interviews that the name, the Marvel Universe of Origin Stories, didn't came for Marvel Comics, if not for a Russian writer, Andrei Platonov, that has a book that the title I write it is The Fierce and Beautiful World.
Right.
And I saw in an interview that inspired you, the title. And I wanted to know if you read this author and if it was related to the book or it had some kind of influence or it was just the beautiful of the title.
You know, I'm a bit challenged as a reader, you know, and I was a kind of child prodigy when it came to literature at a very young age. I
Okay.
was reading Genet and Raymond Radiguet and Gogol. So but I also my ability to read was a little bit challenged. I'm certainly not dyslexic, but I'm a terribly slow reader.
Okay.
And this ethereal part of me had a way of absorbing almost by osmosis. Books became fetish objects to me.
Okay.
And and so I never read Platonov really that closely or deeply, but I
Okay.
was I was so moved. Its titles are very important to me. I can't think of I can only think of one of my books that I didn't quite have the title for. And that was a book called I Met Someone.
Oh, yes.
But found that
I didn't read it.
when I found that title, I thought I'd found God, you know. So book titles are very important for me. And this Fierce and Beautiful World title was something that struck me to my core, you know, to my core. And I liked also, obviously, you know, that so much of my work is made of word play, you know.
Yes.
And the Marvel universe, that I could co-opt that title. And yet, for those who read my work, it could be an overall title for
Yes.
my entire body of work, which, I've come up with ideas for that too. One of the overall titles I came up with is from Piranesi, who did a suite of etchings called Imaginary Prisons. So
Okay.
that was one idea. And in fact, I have that tattooed on my back in
Wow.
Italian,
Wow.
Imaginary.
Wow.
The other title, overall title for my book, which I think would be the one, would be Wild Psalms, right?
Yes, I know it
Yeah,
because I think it was some kind of reboot of Wild Palms. It made me laugh. What
yeah,
is this?
yeah. So Wild Psalms is what I would call all of my work, but the Marvel Universe was a close second or third, and I like the idea of tweaking my nose at the corporate idea of what the Marvel Universe is. But then as you
Yes.
go deeper in the book, you see the connections and the importance of it to the book. So I'm not being frivolous about it at all. So Fierce and Beautiful World, there's another book, I think it was about the therapist Reich, which was called Storming Heaven, you know. And that was another title that that just pierced my soul. You know what I mean? So that's how the title came about. And Origin Stories, was another kind of flippant sort of homage to genre. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because uh, I did consider them origin stories, as one could really say describe any novel or short story. You know what I mean? It's all an origin story.
Um, in the book, there are some chapters that have rare titles like New Mutants and Endgame. Endgame is a word that is used in Star Trek, X-Files, the Avengers movie, and New Mutants, a very title in Marvel Comics. I wanted to know if you had some relation with comic books and the superhero movies, if you still read comics, if you like it, because you wrote a rare comic book in a rare style, and there is no much info of your passion or not about comics.
Not, like anyone my age, I was very interested in Superman and all of those books of their time, but I was never a comic book freak. And the way
Okay.
Wild Palms came about is um, I was approached by James Truman, who had become the editor of Details in New York. And he said, would you consider doing a comic book at the end of the book? And I didn't really have much interest in that. But then uh, he found this well-known illustrator named Julian Allen, who wrote for did illustrations for the New Yorker. And we would go out with a photographer and we would storyboard whatever we were going to do that month. I don't think it was weekly. I can't remember now.
It's something strange because there is like the chapters are in 2 pages, so it's like some civilizations Japanese because it's rare for use market doing that, and the
Yeah,
technique of having.
some of them were even 3 pages, I think, or 4 pages. That was just James's idea. He had this
Okay.
idea and he had the power to make that happen. So, but I was never you know, a huge comic book fan. It's like my obsession has always been language more than image. And and I don't speak any other language than English because it's that stupid primitive part of me. I'm so consumed by English that I can't. I can't. I love phrases and the sound and the feel of other languages, but it was all too late for me. I never had the ambition to learn another language, because lurking behind that second language would be a third and a fourth and a fifth and a sixth. I don't have that talent or capability. And the same with comics. I was completely focused on prose. And while I could appreciate comics, as I could appreciate on a different level film or cinema, um, my only pursuit and obsession was prose and language and the poetry that is hidden inside the best prose for me.
Okay, perfect. Well, I only have to know and tell you that Wild Palms is incredible. If you ever do a sequel in literature or whatever, be my guest. I love it. And well, Bruce, we are running out of time, but I wanted to ask you one question that is from your future book, Amputation. There is a preview in internet about wildfires in LA or the Stephen Colbert, the Timothy Chalamet, but it is not very big, the previews. I wanted if you can tell us a bit, and we are on time.
Okay, so
Uh,
I live here, and I have many close friends that were directly affected by the fires. And it's called amputation because I read an interview where someone was talking about what happened, and they said it was like two cities had been amputated from Los Angeles. And I
yes.
drove through both of those cities before you were able to. I drove through them because I had a pass. You would never have thought that it was a fire. Never.
Okay.
It looked
Okay.
like a full-blown terrorist attack.
Oh,
Downtown, um, thousands of homes in the hills just leveled, gone. And I thought, I had thought that I was finished writing novels, you know. I wrote this book, I think, in 7 weeks. And
okay.
it's about 230 pages, so it's probably the shortest book I've written. But it's a full-on, full-dress novel. And it's written in much in the same style as many of my books, an interlocking ensemble of characters. One is a stunt double for Timothy Chalamet. Another is the actual mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass. Another is Stephen Colbert, who is pinned under a tree for the entire book and lives, but is injured so badly that he gives up his show, which he just did in real life,
Which is
right?
I was going to tell you that this is incredible. That the last week it was canceled.
Yeah.
Well, Bruce, we are having 3 minutes and Zoom will quit us. Great pleasure to interview. Thanks for all.
I'm
Come
I'm
here.
very happy to you both, and thank you. Thank you both.